Hello, in this video what we're going to do is talk about the WCAG audit report assessment and give you an idea of the types of things that are involved and what you need to produce at the end. So I want to start by giving us some background into what an accessibility consultancy is. So the purpose of you doing this assignment is to mimic an accessibility consultancy out within industry. So we know that consultants are people who are brought in to solve a particular problem or who have particular expertise and can give advice. And when it comes to accessibility, there's typically two types of locations where people can get that expertise and advice from. In some companies, particularly if you've got a large company, you might have some internal expertise in both designing and implementing accessible solutions. So those people are typically embedded within the company culture, they have expert knowledge of the products, and the accessibility knowledge that they have may be very specific to those products. So if a company makes software, your accessibility person within that company may not necessarily know about accessibility for the web. They may not know about accessibility for virtual reality if the company focuses on desktop interactions. You find that very large companies, your Microsofts, your Apples, they all have huge accessibility companies within, and it's becoming more and more popular that as companies become almost kind of medium-sized, they're starting to create their own accessibility unit within it. Other than that, it tends to be individuals who have some expertise or knowledge and can turn their hand to solving most of the larger problems. But there are cases where you need to buy in external expertise, and that typically comes from a consultancy. So let's say you are the company who works on desktop interactions and you decide you want to look at virtual reality. So you might bring in an external company to either give you advice on the design of that application so that accessibility is considered from the beginning, or you may have some ideas, you might have some prototypes and you want to assess them. So a consultancy will typically have a broad range of expertise, and their job is to come in and give you fresh eyes on the project. It's an expensive thing to do, which is why as companies get bigger and their customer base gets bigger, they tend to bring that in-house. What an accessibility consultant typically does is they would write a report. Sometimes you would go to the location of that company and give a presentation to the board about how accessible their products are and the risks attached to the accessibility profile that they have. Sometimes you can also do user studies. So you can take people with disabilities, have them try to use a system and report on the issues that they find. And that tends to be somewhere of a mix between accessibility and usability principles. So I've been involved in a number of different consultancy projects. So we have within the department the Human-Centered Computing Consultancy, or otherwise known as HC3, and we do a bunch of stuff each year with industry partners. We might, so for example, I've gone out to companies and taught them about the design lifecycle and how you can include accessibility in different parts as a training experience. In some cases, we have had requests for something exactly like this, an accessibility audit. So one of the people that we used to subcontract for, which I still think is an awesome company, is Paciello Group. So the Paciello Group has blended and moulded over time, and they've become a company that will now create accessibility solutions. They typically focus on blind and low vision users. But they do also do a bunch of external companies. So the types of companies that I've been working with as a result of that are typically very large companies, but in a very specific area. So banking is one particular area where they tend to buy in accessibility consultancy just because of the risk profile of that business area. So the Paciello Group website, when you get into this, go back to that website because it has a whole bunch of information on different tools that you can use. They have colour contrast checkers, they have kind of a one-stop shop for a bunch of stuff which will help speed up the process that you're going through there. So we're going to write a report, right? So who's going to read the report? And this is really important, and this is why this type of report is very difficult to read. So I've identified 3 main users or readers of the report. The first is the people who control the money. So this is your company board, your company directors, this is the CEO, the finance officer. You have to convince through this report that accessibility is something they should spend money on. And often when you're commissioned by a group within the company, this is what they want. They need your report to go to the people who control the money to say, look, we need to invest in this. I am doing the development and I know that this is a problem. So your job as part of this is to write, and this is where the executive summary comes in. That's what the person who controls the money will read. The next group is the people who controls the resources, and that's typically something like a scrum master or a product owner, someone who is controlling the development effort and allocating development effort to different things. So you need to give them an indication of how severe an issue is and how much resource will be needed to resolve that. The final group is the developer. So the developer will be the most technically literate of all of those groups because they're the person that's regularly creating this content, but they won't be experts on accessibility. The developer is looking for very specific recommendations at a technical level. So you have to, overall, convince people accessibility is a good idea, tell them how much resource it will take to resolve any issues that you've identified, and tell them exactly how they should resolve those issues. So there's a real balance between content for the layperson. Your finance guy is probably not going to understand the technical elements, and the very technical recommendations, which is what the developer will need and understand. So the website that you will be working on is this website. It's actually an older website. We'll access it through the Wayback Machine. And it's a website by Wellwood Leslie, Chartered Architects. And we won't actually look at all of those pages, but we'll look at a subset of them to identify some accessibility challenges that they have within this version of their website. They have a new version now, but this one has some nice issues for you to uncover, so I've kept this one. So what's the process we're going to be going through? There is a process, and highlighted here are key documents that you need, and I'll show you those documents in a second. So the first thing is that you're going to go to the screenshots document. This is a list of all of the pages that you have to do, and this is the scope for the report. So all the pages on the website will not be on there, just focus on the pages that are on there. From there, you will go to the audit spreadsheet. So this is a way that you can track issues across pages, look for similarities, look for differences, and start to give you a sense of how prevalent an issue is across the site. You'll then start to thematically group those issues together. So I've provided you with 2 thematic, get rid of that, go away. No, give me 1 second, I'll try and get rid of it. Okay. You can thematically group the issues together. I've given you 2. I've given you colour and structure, but there will be other issues. Now, WCAG uses the POUR like acronym. That's not going to be meaningful to the guy who controls the money. So the person who controls the money doesn't need to know the technical detail of the guidelines, they just need to know the impact of those guidelines. So thematically grouping things can make it much easier to present to that varied group that we talked about. From there, you're going to pick out some key findings and recommendations so that you can give a high-level summary, and you're going to put all of that into your report document and submit that as a PDF. So in kind of summary, this is roughly what we're looking for. So the executive summary is worth 10%, and that's a high-level summary of the report. There's a section on about this report, and that's kind of your justification for accessibility, your methodology, making sure that that can be replicated, justifying the decisions you've made about your methodology, and any limitations that your report has. Then we have key findings and recommendations. So the thing that we're assessing here is, can you pick out those key things that should be a priority and identify things that will either be, an easy fix or things that will take a lot of effort to do. And that's the kind of 2 extremes that people like to be recommended. They either want this, if you can say this will be a quick solution if you do X, Y, Z and you'll solve life for all of this group of people, great. Otherwise, you might say you have this structural issue and you need to fix that before you get any further down this hole. Both of those are potential key findings. Then there's a section on detailed findings, and that's bringing those things together into kind of issue groupings like colour, like structure. And then there's professionalism marks at the end, about kind of using appropriate headings, consistent writing, and so on. So the important thing to remember about the professionalism aspect is that you're writing a report about accessibility. So it's really important that you leave some time at the end to think about how accessible your report is. So if I was blind and I got your report, are the captions meaningful and descriptive for me to figure out what the image that you've shared is? Do you have appropriate headings using the heading structure within Word so that I can skip to the correct section? Is your contents page up to date? All that sort of stuff. Now, the only other thing I want to talk about here is the length, because it says there that your report should be about 40 to 50 pages. That seems like this is a huge thing and probably seems quite intimidating, but hopefully you'll see that just with the style of the report and the fact that you can basically take, so see for those detailed findings, you can basically take all of the text that already exists as examples within the issue groups and just make it specific to this thing. So you might be changing a small amount of code or an image, but all of the description that goes around it and the justification can all stay the same. Plagiarism is not an issue in this case when you're copying from the template group, because the whole purpose is to make sure that within a business all of your reports are consistent but also efficient within the group. So if you can have we have like in-house a set of these issue groups that will be reused so that we're not having to redo work all of the time. It reduces the issue of spelling and grammar as well coming in because we're just reusing the same thing. Okay, so let me jump to show you some other information. So if I get my thing. So there is a document which is basically what I've just told you now. The key thing here is that it is a group assignment, so you need to select your own teams by Friday. Anyone who's not in a team by Friday, I will allocate as usual, and then they'll be confirmed for Monday. That gives you 2 weeks of intensive work, so we won't use all of the class time, but the class time is actually quite short at only 2 hours anyway. So you've got a bunch of other time during the week that you can dedicate to doing this, and if you divide things between the team effectively, and I'll show you how you might do that, that's going to make a big difference, so you're going to have plenty of time to complete the assignment. So we are going to look at WCAG 2.0. Now WCAG 2.1 exists already and there are a bunch of additional success criteria. If you want to, there's a link there, you can go and look at them, but I'm not expecting you to do anything for 2.1, and that's an effort just to keep this task manageable, because you'll see that it's very easy to let the scope grow and grow and grow. There's a link to the website that you want to audit there, and there's a list of the important steps that you'll take and the documents that you need that I've just uploaded. So as a team, you'll submit your final report as a PDF and the audit spreadsheet, that'll be an Excel file, and submit them as a zip file together. Standard late submissions, etc. apply, and my kind of plea here to make sure that you have an accessible document, appropriate structures, appropriate captions, etc. And there'll be a peer review at the end. So there is the same information that I presented here about the marking criteria to give you an idea, so you can always refer back to that. So let me, as the final thing, show you these documents that I spoke about. So the first one is that there's a screenshots document. This would typically be provided by the company that you're working for. They would say, we are either interested in these pages or this task. So I've done audits where someone just has a number of pages that they've created, and they want those assessed before they then go on and build more pages based upon those. I've also had situations where people are doing a task, so I would like my users to be able to book a table at my restaurant. Is that process accessible? And so you work through the task regardless of the pages that you would encounter along the way. This case is a screen-based evaluation. So there are 7 pages that you have to look at, which is the home page, the About, Team, Services, Project, Links and Contact page. So the page itself will look like this. Now, this is within the Wayback Machine. So we're only really interested in the actual website itself. Anything of this top part here that relates to the Wayback Machine, we're not interested in the accessibility of that. So there are a number of ways that I could approach this, and the best way to illustrate that is to use my highly recommend Your Honour. Yeah, it's on some bizarre Sky Atlantic maybe, but yeah, as an aside. Okay, so the audit spreadsheet, let me open that, probably take ages. Nope, we're fine. So this has for level A and for level AA. So level A is the simplest version, level AA is becoming more complex, and we have level AAA, which is the most accessible option, and we are just doing to AA right now. So we have each of the criteria down the left hand side here, and each of these columns is a page. So I can make my first page there the home page, this one the services page, etc. So what I recommend is that you divide these guidelines per person, so that one person will do all of the non-text content looking for alt text, and they'll do that across all of the pages. So the advantage there is that someone builds expertise in one particular area, which makes it more efficient to apply across different pages. Some of these, so there is no time-based media, so you would just say not applicable. But let's have a go at doing this non-text option. So if I go back to the website, I can do this manually. So if I go to developer tools, so I'm in Chrome, you'll be able to do this with lots of different browsers. And I'm going to highlight this image here. So I can see that this image has the alt text Wellwood Leslie. I'm not particularly happy about that because I think it's a descriptive, like an additional decorative image, and so I think it should be all equals empty. So I'm just going to record that on there. So I'm just going to say top left image should have top left image is decorative. But has alt text. And so I can continue this across all of the pages. I'm probably going to find very similar issues across all of the pages, to be fair. If you want to do something a bit more automated, you can do. You have to go and Google for accessibility tools, and you get a whole bunch of things that you can do. Some of these are accessibility checkers. Some of these are a list of tools that you can review and pick out some. Chrome has a, what are they called? Like a built-in widget thing. And the Paciello group have a whole bunch of different ones as well. So you can divide these by, so that you're only going to get the 2.0 ones, and you can carry on that way. Where it's not applicable, obviously just put that in, but you should have something for each column and each of the way down. So remember that the AA is on the next column, So what I suggest is that as a group, you kind of maybe look through one page, looking at the different types of guidelines and success criterion, and then you can move on and start dividing them up. So to get specific information on each of these success criterion, we can go to the WCAG 2.0 website, and I can see for each of these guidelines. Let's just go to the non-text one because I'm interested in. It says how to meet 1.1, and I've got a full description of that. Here are all the types of non-text content that it may be. Here are the different techniques that people may use, and here are some links to help me. So when you're looking for your solutions, this is going to be valuable information there as well. Okay, what else is in my document list? Okay, so the report template, I'm going to go through each section to give you a sense of what is in there. So this is a Word document. Typically, we have a series of Word documents. We would convert them to PDF and ensure that they're an accessible PDF before we send them out. Because it's easy to inadvertently change a Word document, and you don't want the client changing things on their end in error. So we make a PDF so that that's kind of nailed down as to what we've provided them, but obviously there's an additional level. So there is a number of standard text sections within the report. Some of them have kind of a little bit of information where you need to add context in terms of the time, or usually the month and the year at which this is being done. Some guidelines change a lot, company may change their own guidelines and so on, so you want to give it context as to what version of these things you're actually comparing them against. The table of contents will generate itself, you just need to update that. So the executive summary, we know that's a high level summary that you're presenting to the board, for example, no more than one page. We've got some times where you need to change just the month and the year. Let me zoom in slightly, actually. There's some sections where you have to add information. There's some detail that is, you can assume you're part of the human-centered computing consultancy for this, the purpose of this assessment, so that doesn't need to change. Some information as to what you should include, but the key thing here is that when you get to the detailed findings, this issue group for colour, I've basically taken this issue from that template document and pasted it in there. That's all I've done. So what I would expect you to do, now note that it uses colour, the American version, and that's typically just because we have a lot of American clients, so we use US English to write. If you want to change it to UK English, I've got no objection. So we have, you would change, for example, the images, you would change, for example, some of the kind of information about specific colours. The images you might change to match the specific information that you discover. But all of this summary about, okay, what is the description? Colour doesn't give sufficient contrast. It should be at least this contrast level. That's not information that's going to change, so just leave that there. The objective is to use as much of this and write as little as possible when it comes to doing the key kind of detailed findings. And then you're linking out to standards and the criteria there that they're going to meet. So that, if I go to 1.4.3, it's going to be double A, I think. Yep. That is basically coming from here. This is my success criterion highlighted. So the last thing is those template groups. So they just exist as 2 Word documents. Each of them has a number of issues. I think the colour one has 2 or 3 issues, and you can just copy and paste the whole issue. So that is the overall plan. So basically what I'm looking for you to do immediately is to allocate yourself to a group. You have until Friday. If anyone isn't allocated by this Friday, I will do that myself. looking forward, the content for next week will be an introduction to WCAG. So what I want us to do is, I'll get that material up over the weekend at the latest. You can look at that material. We will discuss it on Tuesday. We'll have a couple of tasks and we'll explore a few different ways that you might conduct this audit. And then from there, you'll be working in your teams to complete the audit spreadsheet and then turn that into the report. So don't worry if you don't know much about WCAG right now. You'll get that on Tuesday. By the end of the class on Tuesday, you'll have a clear idea of how you're going to progress. So that is all. As usual, any questions, please post them in the assessment questions channel on Teams, and I will see you all soon.